Okay, so thank you everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for investing 60 minutes in how to upgrade your school facilities for free while cutting your energy costs and enhancing the students' learning environment. So my name is Ashley Hines Lynch, and I am the Director of Business Development at ECG and your moderator for today's webinar. Today's hosts are energy and educational industry experts, ECG's CEO, Kendra McQuilton, and the Business Development Manager in New York, Michael Ford, who is a retired superintendent of schools and a current New York State Superintendent Leadership and Training Coach. We encourage you to make this an interactive webinar today. We have the question and answer chat open, so please feel free to type in a question at any time. I will be off screen monitoring the Q&A chat, and we will either type back a response or I will bring it live for both Mike and Kendra to answer. And we will also have a few polls along the way, so please feel free to participate. It will help us in engaging more with the audience. And again, also at the end, to keep it even more interactive, we will open up a live chat function. So you will have the option to raise your hand in the chat box, and then we will put you live so you can actually speak to the presenters and ask a question directly. And then remember, this webinar is for you. It is budget season, amid a pandemic, and with unknown aid changes coming, and we really want to help you alleviate your school budget now. So please feel free to use any of these functions to interact with us. So again, thank you for attending, and I will now pass it on over to our presenter, Kendra.
Thank you, Ashley, and welcome everyone. We appreciate your time today. I'm actually going to turn it over to Mike to get us started.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. We're glad you're here. Glad you've taken a little time out of your day to be with us. And Kendra, if you just move that slide up one, that'd be great. So what we're going to talk about today is how do you improve your learning environment? You know, going back to the educational research way back to the 1980s, when Larry Lazat and Ron Edmonds and others identified there were 7 correlates to an effective school. One of those correlates was the learning environment. And so this is an opportunity for us to improve the learning environment, to reduce our energy cost, reduce our energy footprint as well. So your energy costs can be reduced by at least 30% in this process. How to do it with a financing way that's just going to make sense to you, that's not going to cost you anything, with a company that will never charge you a penny. You will never pay us 1 red cent to have us involved in your project. And even better than that is your taxpayers will never pay a penny for this either. And so we're excited to talk about this concept of energy performance contracting with you today, because it's going to put all that forward. So Kendra, why don't you introduce yourself a bit and how you got to this point?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So I've been with ECG for about 20 years now. It's my family business. And in that time, I started out answering phones, doing all kinds of work, and I assumed ownership about 4 years ago. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish for school districts. Our only market is K through 12 schools. In the time I've been with ECG, we have protected over 125 school districts during their energy performance contracts. And those projects total about $1 billion worth of self-funding capital construction. Self-funding meaning out of guaranteed energy savings. So very excited to be here today to share some information with you.
And as Ashley indicated, I'm Mike Ford, and I began my career in education as a middle school English teacher and was trained as a speech and theater and English teacher, and then moved into staff development, where I was a quote unquote instructional expert, wrote a book on instruction on teaching years ago that was used throughout the country. And so that was my background, was really being an instructionally focused leader. And I'm sharing that with you because many of your superintendents come from that same tact as well. We all were trained to be teachers more so than leaders of projects. Moved into a BOCES at one point where I directed their leadership, their professional learning projects, and then to the superintendency, where I was 15 years as a superintendent of Phelps Clifton Springs School District. And as Ashley indicated today, I worked for the New York State Council of School Superintendents, operating a leadership coaching program, coaching school leaders across the state from assistant principals to superintendents. And we're really excited about the work that we do. So now what I want to do is tell you what we're going to do in this next 55 minutes that we've got remaining. we're going to start out with me talking about construction projects in general from a superintendent perspective. And then we'll fine tune that into energy performance contracting and go over what is an EPC. We'll also talk about how these projects are financed, and then how it is we can ensure your district's success, how we will not let you down, and then ourselves as an organization, how we make a difference and why we're a unique player in this field and able to provide the support that our school districts across the state need on these types of projects. So looking back at me as a leader, as a superintendent, I began as a 7th grade English teacher. So I know a lot about onomatopoeia, about simile and metaphor, writing process, and that was my life day in and day out. And then one day I wake up and someone says, you should be a leader. And so I go into a leadership role in a school. But remember, what I'm really trained to be is a teacher. And I find myself as a superintendent of schools of a 2,000 student district. And in my interviews, I made the mistake of telling the board that their facilities needed some work. And they reminded me that at my second board meeting, that I had told them that, and they said, get on this. And so I begin that work of getting on it, and we do a facilities review. We look at our project. We recognize that, we've got 3 aging elementary schools, and we own 120 acres of land where our middle school and high school are sitting. And so we begin this process of going in through a capital project and ask our community, do you want to close these 3 elementaries and build? And they say yes. And so we build a state-of-the-art $45 million project that included upgrades to the elementary school, new elementary school complex, upgrades to the high school and the middle school, built a pool, all of that. And quite frankly, I'm scared to death the whole time. This is the largest capital project in our county's history. And I am a 41-year-old superintendent who's never even been a principal or assistant principal, and I'm managing this major project. And I kept remembering what my mother used to tell me. I grew up on Long Island, and we would take the train from Babylon train station into New York City, and Mom would say to me always look like you know where you're going, because it's the people who look lost that get preyed upon. And what I remembered as a superintendent, it was my job to always look like I knew what I was doing, because the minute I looked clueless, my community would be all over me. And so that was our reality, is that I moved into this major project. And like I said, it was big. We closed 3 elementaries. We had major renovations while school was in session to both the middle school and the high school. We had the worst possible electrical contractor on earth working on our project. I had more meetings with my attorney than I did, my business official. We had 100 workers a day on our campus while our children were attending schools. We had, countless subcontractors. There were daily challenges, obstacles, and opportunities mired in this whole project. And again, I'm an English teacher who was playing the role of a super. I had a nicer suit now that I was a superintendent. But I'm trying to manage this project. And this is what we ask our superintendents to do on a daily basis. And those of you that are currently in a capital project, think about this year, dealing with the pressures of the COVID pandemic, trying to maintain education, trying to get kids in school as many days a week as you're able to do it, all at the same time when you're trying to manage your construction project. And it's just it's a burden that I think we don't fully appreciate and understand. And so we're going to talk about how to mitigate some of that burden. And then there's also a piece that for me, I think is important. Part of why when Kendra and I talked earlier in the year and she said, how'd you like to help us out and come work with us a little bit? I said, yes. And it wasn't because I really like her that much. She's okay. It's because I looked at this as such a win for school districts. Here's what my crystal ball is telling me. That, I lived through the gap elimination adjustment, and I know many of you did too, 12, 14 years ago. And so our districts are going to face a potential funding cliff in the 22-23 school year. We're about to get a bailout from Washington that's going to hopefully make your budgets look okay for next year. But the year after that, we know there's going to be issues. State revenues are down, federal spending is up. There's going to be a funding cliff that's going to hurt us. And so if you get started on an EPC project now, and you're going to learn more as we go through this, It has the potential to create a funding stream for you that can help offset some of the cuts you may have to make. Every time you have a budget deficit, there's 3 ways to mend it. There's make cuts and eliminate things you currently spend money on. There's find savings, find ways to do what you do at lower cost. And there's increased revenue. And quite frankly, too often we don't think about how to increase revenue because we think the only revenue opportunities we have are state aid and taxes. But there are other ways to increase revenues, and EPCs are one of those ways to increase revenues. So I'm excited about the fact that we're going to be able to help you find ways to increase revenue through an EPC. Kendra?
Thank you, Mike. Before we get into the specifics of what an energy performance contract is, which is a response to all of the challenges Mike just laid out, we'd like to just launch 2 quick polls to get a sense of the audience's background with this concept so we can steer the conversation appropriately.
Okay, I'm going to launch both of them right now. The first question here is, have you ever been involved with an energy performance contract? And the second one are, what are your goals that you have for your district? All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. I still see a lot of answers coming in. Okay, all right, I'm going to end the polling and we're going to share the results. So it looks like today we have more people that have not been involved with an energy performance contract. So that's good. We'll be able to explain that further for you. And out of the goals for your district, we have upgrading your facilities, which ranks the highest. We also have find new revenue streams to fund programs, decrease cost, and decrease carbon footprint. So these are some great results, and we thank you because it's going to help gauge the next section of our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Okay, so we're here mainly to share how an energy performance contract project can help your district, particularly now with the financial challenges that have always been there but are only increasing with COVID. And not only that, but just bring a positive initiative to your district in a time when I think most districts really need that. Also, many of you are engaged in building condition surveys right now or next year or the next 5 years. And you'll be asked by your constituents to look for ways to fund these capital projects that are the minimum stress on the taxpayer. And so this is a way to achieve that and still get the work done that you need to accomplish. So for those of you who may be not familiar with the energy performance contracting concept, this is not a gimmick. This is not something that private companies are pushing. This is actually a state-sponsored financing mechanism. It's an alternative financing mechanism for capital projects. And it's outlined in New York State Energy Law, Article 9. And feel free to email me after the presentation. I'll be happy to send you a copy of that. And the essence of this law is that the state wants to see school districts and municipalities have a way to implement energy efficient upgrades now. They realize that you only have so much funding, yet the implementation of energy efficiency measures benefits not only your school district, but the state, the country, our environment as a whole. And so there has to be a way for you to expedite the implementation and the funding of the specific types of projects. And so they've allowed you to take advantage of the concept of energy performance contracting, which allows you to streamline the upgrade process. It's a contract, it's an agreement, and really a partnership between your school district and what's called an energy services contractor. These are large companies like Johnson Controls, typically Siemens, Honeywell, Ameresco, other companies, and they're a professional services provider, actually. So even though they're doing construction in a turnkey manner, they're a professional services company. So it's a partnership, a true partnership. And these companies will come through your buildings. They will respond to a request for proposals. They will do detailed audits. They will be looking for any and all energy savings measures, such as installing LED lighting, which is the big one right now. But then what they're doing is they're pairing up that low-hanging fruit, that quick return on investment type upgrades like lighting, to pay for more expensive energy needs that you have, or energy related capital needs that you have, such as boilers, roofs, windows. These items pay for themselves in a very long number of years. But the essence of performance contracting is that you're using the savings from the overall aggregate project scope to pay for the upgrades themselves over time. The energy savings is guaranteed. So if you move forward with one of these projects and you do not see the guaranteed amount of annual savings, the contractor has to cut you a check for the difference. So that's what it is in a nutshell. Main point on this is that it's a streamlined, no out-of-pocket cost, zero taxpayer impact way to move forward with energy-related capital items. Okay, and the funding of energy performance contracts comes from various sources. Primarily, it comes from a budgetary utility savings. On average, we will reduce your utility budget by 30% because we're going in and it's a very laser focused approach. What is consuming energy in your buildings? What model or what vintage is that lighting versus what's the most efficient equipment for that today that's available? What's the savings? And that's how it's the project scope and size is calculated out. So when you do that, you generally will see about a 30% savings because all the old energy hog systems are replaced with new, very efficient technology. You also get a budgetary savings from operations and maintenance that went toward the old equipment. For example, if you're paying a company to come in and patch the old boiler that's on its last legs every year. I mean, we just spoke to a district that's spending about $500,000 a year on maintenance contracts like that to keep old equipment going. That's a savings and those are real dollars, that those costs go away when you do the upgrades. You're also going to be eligible for building aid. We do have a few people from Pennsylvania here. This is mostly a New York type of incentive, but you will get building aid on the project. You'll also be eligible for any and all utility rebates. There are a ton of utility rebates out there, and you've probably received some degree of them, thus far in the work that you've done. But when you do a comprehensive district-wide energy upgrade, you will be stunned at the amount of rebate money that your district will collect. And we're going to go into a case study in a minute. The district got a $700,000 utility rebate. That's bonus on top of having all the work funded out of the savings. So at the end of the project, at the end of the day with this type of a project, EPCs avoid any local tax hikes. There will be absolutely no tax increase when you do an EPC project. And for some districts that don't have a lot of building aid, that can be an especially huge advantage. Okay, so we'd like to share a quick case study with you just to demonstrate how this concept played out at one of our New York districts here. So we are engaged as the technical owners rep and engineers for a district in the capital region, 17 buildings. They engaged with an EPC, and their utility savings is going to be $335,000 annually, which equates to, again, about 30% of what they're currently spending. The project includes upgrades such as LED lighting, which is a staple in all of these projects, HVAC, and temperature controls. How many of you are looking at your ventilation systems, your heating systems right now? I think probably all of you have had some level of discussion about them. Most school districts are plagued with issues with these systems. And the Government Accountability Office just did a report that about 40 to 50% of school districts across the country don't have fully functioning HVAC systems. So this is a way to fund those upgrades once and for all. That's a cornerstone of these projects. Now, the savings that the district is going to receive on an annual basis is going to be the funding source, the primary funding source for about $9.4 million worth of upgrades. So that $335,000 in utility savings, instead of just giving that like they're doing, we're doing last year and the year before to the utility suppliers to keep old equipment going, that's now savings in their budget because they don't have to spend that anymore because there's new efficient equipment there. So their budget used to be here, now it's 30% less. The delta there is the $335,000 in savings simply gets redeployed in their budget toward a debt service. And they're getting all of this new equipment for the same amount of money that they were already spending. And I think that's really the easiest way to convey the concept in a nutshell. You're already spending this money. By doing an EPC, you're allowed to take 30% of what you're already spending in your utility lines, redeploy it, get new equipment, get something back for it, instead of just enriching the utility suppliers to keep the old stuff going. That's the concept in a nutshell. And then finally, this particular district has 95% building aid. So they're certainly on the higher end. And so if they were to do a $9.4 million bond, the taxpayers would still need to pick up 5% of home share for that work. And that would be $500,000 a year over 15 years. So that work is still happening, but the taxpayers don't have to foot that $500,000 a year, okay? Because savings is paying for all of the costs. Now, if you have, say, 50% building aid at your district, and you went ahead with a $9.4 million project like this one, your taxpayer savings would be about $5 million per year over 15 years, because your taxpayers would have to pick up 50% of the bill for a $9.4 million project. So the less aid you get, the better this taxpayer proposition becomes. Again, those are real dollars. I wanted to share with you some of the operational savings, and this is very powerful because there's no other way, I believe, that you can make this serious a dent in your operating costs than going about this method. At this district, the operations and maintenance savings was $156,000 per year. So that's calculated by looking at invoices from contractors that are no longer going to be coming in to patch the old boiler, right? Or savings from not having to replace the lighting for X number of years. Again, this isn't made up. I mean, we're verifying it all, of course, but these are things that your district's spending money on, and you can convert that into savings in this process. Water savings, 2.5 million gallons a year. That's the equivalent of 25 homes that's going away. The water usage of 25 homes not happening every year. Kilowatt hour savings, 2.4 million a year. That's the equivalent of 240 homes off the grid per year. In terms of gas, the equivalent of 1,000 homes per year. So if there's anyone who's concerned, particularly concerned with being good environmental stewards, again, there's no other way that I see that you could make this kind of significant impact in greenhouse gases and in your carbon footprint at your district. The building aid that's coming in on this project, $480,000 a year, which equates to $7.2 million over the 15-year term. And again, the utility rebates are coming in at $700,000. So when you tally it all up, and again, it is more complex than this, but I'm doing this mostly for demonstration purposes, just to convey the power of this concept. They're getting $9.4 million worth of construction done that's being paid for by guaranteed energy savings. Okay, so that's the funding source for the 9.4. Plus they're getting 700,000 in rebates, plus they're getting $7.2 million in building aid over the term, plus they're getting $2.8 million in operations and maintenance savings over the entire term of the project, the 15 years. When you tally all of that up, the total economic value for this school district that they generated just by making the decision to do an EPC project is over $20 million. That is real significant benefit that the district is generating, again, just for making the choice to go ahead and do this. And there's no capital outlay. All of the costs are absorbed by the contractor to develop and design the project. You don't pay anything until a full year after the upgrades have been installed. So you have a full year's worth of guaranteed energy savings measured, verified, and accrued in the bank to then make that payment to the bank. If you don't have the savings there, the contractor cuts you a check for the difference. So you could go ahead and do $9 million worth of construction, but would you get the rebates? Would the building aid, come out largely as a cash bonus? You would have to go to the taxpayers for a portion of it and put stress on them. And you probably wouldn't be generating this much operations and maintenance savings because it wouldn't be as focused as these projects are, in those systems. So it really is something to think about because we've seen this time and time again. The more or less aid you get, you can benefit on both ends of the spectrum. Just wanted to throw this in here quickly, just to show you the difference. Now, the picture on the left is the same gymnasium before we upgraded to LED lighting. So the district here was actually paying twice as much for this dim lighting, okay, because it wasn't as efficient or bright than they are now using the LED lighting in the picture on the right. Now, this is where the kids, ultimately, eventually will start taking tests again, and it's a community space where everybody notices the great improvements that are happening in the district, sports, etc. So again, this picture on the left is more expensive for this than it is to go to the LED lighting, which is represented on the right. So it really is a no-brainer, in that regard. I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to close us out.
Great. So I want to take you back to my story as a superintendent and running that big $45 million capital project. Before I became superintendent, I had a short stint as an assistant superintendent in another district. And we were working through a capital project. And on that capital project, we had an architect. And the architect had one of their own employees who was our clerk of the works, if you will, but they worked for the architectural company. And we constantly in that project had difficulty with accountability, if you will, because the person representing us on site was their employee. And so when I went to Phelps Clifton Springs and we did this large project, I always say the best decision we ever made was hiring a construction manager. Because what the construction manager was, and they told me this in their interviews, they were the owner's representative. And so they were there for us. They didn't work for the contractor. They didn't work for the architect. They worked for us. And so when you think about how will you ensure the success of your EPC, I'm going to tell you this. Around the state, especially in upstate New York, we have a lot of not so successful stories of EPCs. And I think and so people sometimes have a bad taste in their mouth from a previous experience. And here's what I'm learning about this, is that if I'm going to have cardiac surgery, I'm not going to go to my general practitioner to do it. I want an expert to do it. The only work that we do at ECG is represent you on EPC projects. And so what you want to do to ensure your success is retain an expert, an industry specialist who's going to represent the owner from the beginning to the end. And that's what's going to ensure your success. That way you're not chasing around your ESCO, you're not arguing about the data, the numbers. You've got someone else, a professional in the field who's doing that. Get that professional verification of the calculations. Make sure that the numbers that they're projecting at the start are the right numbers, because those numbers are the total foundation of the project. Remember, this isn't a typical capital project where, we're just going to spend the taxpayers' money and state aid to get it done. And if we need to put more fund balance toward it, we can. The financial foundation of this project is savings have to equal or exceed cost. And that's the work that we can do. And then appreciate that an EPC is really different than a traditional capital project. And so you need a different team. The architects will tell you they can do this. And I'm friends with a lot of architectural firms and admire a lot of the architectural firms in the state. But the thing that I do know as a superintendent and my dealings with them is this wasn't their wheel that they worked in. They design systems, but they don't have the experience that other specialists will have. And so if you want to make sure that you're successful, that your contract is successful, then make sure you get the right partners on your project as you go. Our group, what we will do with you is we'll manage all critical aspects of the project. We're going to be there in every phase of the project, making sure that your project goes the way it should. There'll be constant oversight of the ESCO, the Energy Services Company. We work closely with all of them. They know what our role is. They know we're going to inspect their work. They expect us to do that. We're going to make sure your savings are there. And as Kendra said, that you get the rebates. I remember when we did our major capital project, there were NYSERDA rebates available to us that my architect didn't know, but my construction manager did. And we were able to get about a $400,000 NYSERDA rebate because my construction manager had been on another project that got it, and he alerted us and the architect to getting it. And then we're going to be your partner. We're going to be your confidential partner in the work. We'll stay there from the beginning till 3 years after the project is done. And we're going to do all of that without you paying us a penny. Our fees all come out of the project. They're built into it. And the district doesn't have to ever approve. You'll never at a board meeting approve a payment to us. So why ECG? Well, again, I just said it, no fees. We will be your best friend at no cost. Our whole focus is energy performance contracting. That's all we do. And so we are that cardiac specialist to you with a heart condition. We will be there for you from start to finish and giving you the specialist perspective. There's a no risk safety net. So if you contact either of us after this and say, hey, let's talk about this. We're going to come in and do an initial energy audit, no cost at all. We're going to help you figure out whether there's a project for you that makes sense. We're going to help you write up RFPs, put it out to the field. If they don't come in a way that makes sense, there's still no risk. You haven't invested one penny in the whole project. So we're going to be there as your partner. We always offer in one of these things, we're going to give you a $5,000 scholarship that you can give to a student at the end of this project or during this project. You get to decide who it goes to. You can set the criteria. We just want to make sure a kid gets an opportunity to do something neat as a result of the work that we've got. So $5,000 scholarship will go to one of the students as you decide. We also have a student engagement program. When this project starts, we think your kids ought to be involved. And so we have an expert on our staff, former superintendent, who will provide you with curricular materials and help your students understand what an EPC is, help them understand how savings are generated, help an economics class understand how it's funded. We'll be able to help your students engage in this project from the beginning through the whole end of it. And one of the other really cool things is you've had a chance to meet my boss, Kendra McQuilton, who is the CEO and owner of this business. And so we are a certified women-owned company, and we're very proud of that.
Thank you, Mike. All right, so just to wrap up, we wanted to share with you just an idea of, okay, so if you're interested in this, how long does all of this take? And the first thing we like to start with is a preliminary energy assessment. We also refer to it as a go, no-go study. We don't want to send any district off on issuing a request for proposals until we are 100% sure that there is a project opportunity that the contractors will respond to before that. And so we do that at no cost, no obligation, and we start with that. And then if we identify that there is an opportunity, there are several steps here. We're going to craft and issue a request for proposal. We're going to interview the respondents. We're going to go through their numbers with a fine-tooth comb. We're going to alert you to any areas of potential risk and mitigate that. We're going to help you negotiate the contract because the contract itself is highly technical. And this is where, unfortunately, a lot of districts have become disappointed even years after the project ended, in that they didn't realize what they were signing, and the contract let the ESCO off the hook for a meaningful savings guarantee. And nobody even picked up on it because they're so complicated to review. Lots of different stories like that, unfortunately. So that's a big area where we focus. We then go on to design the project, and we get SCD approval. So all of that is about a year from, say, now until you get your SCD approval. Then you seek your funding. There's no low bidding. It's just typically a tax-exempt municipal lease borrowing mechanism that you'll work with your financial advisors on, construction, and then for every year that you elect after construction, the ESCOs, the contractors, have to produce a report that proves back to you what the actual savings were. And that's only worth as much as the protocol for that is written up as in the contract. So as I said, you can easily forfeit that guarantee and get a report that's like a book report this thin if you don't make them really go back and measure the savings in a detailed way in the contract. So, but that's where it finishes out, is that every year after the construction, the actual savings report is delivered to the district. We review that and so forth. So it is a streamlined process. There is not any voter approval required. You make a decision as a superintendent, as administrator, as a board to do this, one resolution, and you're off. And we just continue along with this process and deliver those results that I outlined before. And I think we have a few questions because Ashley is back on the screen.
Hi. Well, before we get into the questions, we do have quite a few questions, and then we want to give you the opportunity to ask the questions live. But we do have another poll, so I'm going to launch that. If you wouldn't mind just participating. Okay. I'll keep it going for about 30 seconds. All right, just a few more seconds. I still see some answers coming in. Kendra, you're going to like these answers. Mike, you will too. Okay, thank you everyone for participating. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Okay, so our question was, after learning about how an EPC works and its benefits, are you interested in investigating the opportunity of one? And we got 77% yes, which is great. Thank you, everybody.
I do like that.
There were a few of you that did say that you'd want to contact us further. And Kendra, if you want to move to the next slide, I believe we do have everyone's contact information on that. Okay. And what I'll do is I'm going to read back at some of the questions and let Mike and Kendra answer some of them.
Okay.
One of the first questions we received were, do you know if windows get state aid?
Okay.
State.
They will, well, unless it's in an admin building, they would be eligible for the same building aid as anything else that would be eligible for building aid in an EPC,
Yes.
just as a capital project.
Yes, they do save energy. Okay, the next question is, this one was directed to Mike. This is from Kevin. Would this have the same impact if we already have very low utility rates due to a locally operated energy plant? Mike, something similar to Fairport Electric.
Yeah. Kevin, hey friend, I hope you're doing well at Jamestown. Congratulations. Couple quick things on that. Yeah, even if you have low rates, changing the technology will you'll still get 30% off of the low, if you have a lower energy cost, but we come in and upgrade, there'd be a lower energy cost on a smaller number. But that would be something we'd want to come in and look and assess at, just where you are. But the numbers should still continue to work just as well. And, Kevin, you also had a couple other questions because you're such a proficient writer. You wanted to know, will this still be effective for a poor district with an aid ratio of 98%? Absolutely. Because remember, the savings are being generated off the energy savings, and that's what's funding the project, even with a very high state building aid ratio. And finally, you said, if we're on the cusp of going to a vote on a major capital project, are we too late? No. We're actually dealing with a couple other districts that right now are in the same boat. And what can actually happen is, remember, when you go out on a vote on a capital project, you're asking your community to approve a maximum spending plan on a project. And so what districts are now being able to do when we come in behind that is to pull out the portions of the project that are dealing with energy savings. And so even though your voters might agree, I'll make up a number, of $50 million project, we can pull $3 million out of that project, which just means you'll borrow less and reduce the cost to your taxpayers because we're going to do the other part through an EPC. So you're really not too late as long as the work hasn't begun.
Thank you, Mike. And really just to add on to the question about, does this work for a poor district with 98% aid? That case study we went through, they had 95% aid. What happens, and I didn't really get into it today because it's a whole other aspect to this, but it's a good aspect, is that the guaranteed energy savings has to pay for the principal of the project. So that $9.4 million that district was able to fund in an EPC, that was mostly paid with guaranteed energy savings. You'll still get the aid on that project, just like you're doing a bond, but the only difference is you can only use the building aid you get in an EPC to cover interest on your borrowing. It's the only thing you can apply that to. So what happens is once you've applied that and satisfied that interest, the rest of the building aid comes out as positive cash flow to the school district. And the reason it's set up that way is that the state doesn't want districts propping up not so great energy efficiency projects with a bunch of building aid. So they don't want you doing projects that don't really pay for themselves without the help of a lot of building aid. They want these projects to be self-funding at their core. The building aid can be used to offset the interest. So I would argue the more aid you have in a certain way, the better, because you're going to generate revenue for your school district. You're going to actually pay for the work out of the savings and use most of that building aid that you'll still get as revenue. That's going to come to you as revenue year over year over year. If you don't have any aid or you have very little aid, it still works great because the taxpayers are not going to have to foot as that bill that they normally do, or as much of. So on either side of the spectrum, your community will absolutely benefit in one way or the other.
Great, thank you. We had another question come in. Can you explain how school districts can easily explain this process to the taxpayer in their communications about a capital project?
That's all, Mike.
Well, I always believed as a superintendent, it was my job to make school finance easy. And so I always referred to a school budget as just a big checkbook, right? So money comes in and money goes out. At the end of the day, there's got to be money left over. I can't spend more than I receive. And so when we look at a project like this, we just make it really clear, and we can help you, with some graphics and descriptions if you need that, if you're looking for that in your communication. But that we're going to save this much by doing this upgrade. So by changing all the lights, we will save this much in energy. The cost will be this much. There'll be no additional cost. And so we'll show, that we'll get to a zero or a better number that's a revenue stream for you. But we can show that with simple math in the project, and we'll help you do it in graphics and the like. I can just tell you, 3 days ago, this PowerPoint did not have the graphics that it currently has. And so I am absolutely certain that our team is able to create it in a way that makes it clearer and more understandable to people in the field and to your community. And so, we'll help you do that. And those of us, there are a couple former superintendents on staff that can help with that messaging, because we're used to doing that messaging with our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really a big part of our job is you don't have to worry about how to convey this. We know how to convey this to boards of ed, to all the various stakeholders with varying levels of technical and financial knowledge. We're used to dealing with every single type of administrator and boards of ed at districts. So we know how to make this something that everyone can understand and answer the questions that come up from the various different interest groups.
Now, going off of that, we also had another comment. You might want to add to address the low effort of requirement by the school district staff that will happen when ECG is involved. So if you want to follow up with that.
Oh, thank you. Was that one of our clients?
No, Rob Schneider.
Oh.
Yes, one of our engineers always has this saying, we act as your arm, your expert, a staff member of this specific topic. We work for you. We're here to protect you and be your safety net throughout this process. So as Kendra was saying, you don't have to worry about how to convey this message, because that's what we do. And just with the day-to-day stuff of this project, you don't have to worry about the burden to your staff. That burden comes on us. We handle this for you. So let me see. I don't see that we have any more questions coming in. Again, if you want to ask the question live, you can always raise your hand in the side chat bar and you could talk live. But other than that, let me see if anyone is coming in. All right.
Mike, would you do something?
No, I just want to say thanks to all of you for spending this time. And if this is something that interests you, we'll obviously follow up with many of you, but if any of you want to reach out to us before we reach out to you, feel free to do that. We are glad to work through this and to help you find ways to do the things that are important, upgrade facilities, decrease carbon footprint, decrease cost, and hopefully find some revenue enhancements that can help you save that teacher or two or three or program that you might otherwise have to cut. Because we think we can help you do some of those things in this process. So thanks so much for this hour this afternoon. We appreciate it. And Kendra, I'll leave it to you to close it out.
All right. I think you said it best, Mike. But yes, again, thank you for your time today. And if you have any questions at all, please contact us. If you want a copy of the EPC law or the PowerPoint, our information is here. And we also offer all of you a free preliminary energy assessment to determine, are you or are you not a candidate for this concept? And I think that's a good thing for every district just to have, because it just allows you information on, is this an option or not? Maybe you're not sure if you want to do it right now, but if you decide later, that you need help or funding assistance, then you already know, where you stand with energy and what your opportunity is.
And really quick, we do ask that when we close this off, we have a very brief survey to help serve us better in the future. So if you could please fill it out, we would really appreciate it. And we also have an option on there if you'd like to get a certificate of completion for this webinar, you can click on that as well. So we can provide that over to you. So unless anyone has any further questions, again, we really hope that you enjoyed our session today, and we thank you for your time, and we hope everyone stays safe and wish you a good day. So,
All right.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.